Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give it 1 or 2 minutes for the rest of the people to join. So just bear with us. It's just gone 10, so we're just going to give it 60 seconds and then we're going to kick off. Good morning, everyone that's joined. We're just going to give it another 30 seconds or so before we start for the joiners. Okay, there's just 1 minute past 10. I think we're going to kick off here and we'll let people join as they join. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Codec webinar around governance, risk and compliance in practice. My name is Nick Wall. I'm an account director here at Codec. Thank you to everybody for joining us this morning. We're going to be here for about 45 minutes or so today. Hopefully we'll be done by then. We have a Q&A up at the top there, so if there are any questions, we'll either answer them as we go along, if the speaker can answer as we go, or we'll get to them at the end of the webinar and we'll pick them up at the Q&A at the end. There is a feedback stroke consultation form that will go into the chat as part of this webinar, so please feel free to have a look at that and book some time in with us on that consultation, which is a completely no obligation call with one of our security MVPs, and that'll be in the chat for you. So very quick introduction here from myself to introduce you to the webinar. Then we have Kerry Kelly, who's our internal compliance manager here at Codec. She's going to talk through the AI compliance and governance scenarios that we see and we talk about with our customers. Then we have Tushar Kumar, who's head of our security practice and also Microsoft MVP. He's going to talk about security in practice and real world applications of it and what you might be seeing day to day. And then we're going to have the close from myself and pick up on any questions that we may have at the end of the webinar. So hopefully a number of you on the call will know who Codec is. If you may work with us at the moment, but if you don't, then very quickly I'm going to tell you a little bit about Codec, just over a few seconds or so, and tell you who we are. So essentially, Codec have been in business for over 40 years now, around about 42 years. We're an Irish-based company. We're based in UK and Ireland, and we have offices around Europe and other locations as well. We only do Microsoft. So we're a Microsoft consultancy. We're probably the biggest independent Microsoft partner in UK and I. We have over 300 employees. We have a number of recurring customers that we work with for many, many years, right across the service stack and the full stack of services from Microsoft. And the thing to point out on this slide is, and I want to bring your attention to, is the certifications and the specializations that we have. We have one of the highest amounts of specializations of any partner within UK and Ireland. We've also recently just got the Copilot specialization that we're very pleased to have, and we're one of the first partners in UK and I to actually have that Copilot stroke AI specialization. If you just flick on there, Kerry. So, as I mentioned, we're one of the largest independent partners in UK and Ireland. We cover off the full stack of Microsoft services. So that includes your business applications and services, anything within the 365 Dynamic Suite, Power Platform, Modern Workplace, ERP, CRM, supply chain, etc. We also have our infrastructure side of our business, which covers off data, AI, storage, Azure, Fabric, and the security practice sits within that area. We also have a business consultancy within Codec who looks at business change, looks at business analysis, and we're also a tier 1 CSP. So we look after all of your licensing and licensing optimization for both our existing and new customers. But the reason that we're here today is that a lot of the time when we go out to customers these days, we're being asked a couple of things. The first thing is we want to use AI. We're using AI. How do we use it? How can we get the best out of our existing stack or add to our Microsoft stack? And secondly, how do we secure it? So how do we bring governance, compliance into regulated environments? And how do we make this new world of AI much more secure and compliant? And that's what we're talking about today. And with that in mind, I'll hand you over to Kerry, who's our internal compliance manager, and she'll take it from there.
Thanks, Nick. So yes, everybody, as Nick introduced me, I am Codec's internal compliance manager. So I'm going to be talking about the why we do things in certain ways and how to start embedding AI into your business as safely as possible. In the non-technical way, I'll leave that to Tushar. So I'm going to give some guidance on the AI Act, risk assessments and data protection. One thing I do want to note is that solutions, transfers, process and locations are changing weekly, if not daily. So those responsible in each organisation should keep abreast of any changes on an ongoing basis. This is only a snapshot from a point in time. So we will go into the EU Act in more detail in a later slide, but with both EU and UK business on the webinar, it is useful to remind everybody, even without the new EU Act, which does affect UK businesses, which I will explain, there is no regulatory pass. The Act streamlines regulations that are currently in place that previously had an impact on AI. Before the Act even had teeth, GDPR was the main tool used against AI and any breaches. Saying that, several of the enforced collective fines issued due to GDPR non-compliance within AI sectors have been appealed, left unpaid or overturned. The new Act hopefully will see a change in that. But even with previous fines that were issued, it did start a change in process and how providers have started to do things. The potential fines that you see stated in the blue box on the screen are for general purpose AI, which comes into effect in August 2026. There are actually 3 tiers of fines, which we'll go into further on for misuse of the Act. And for context, the top tier fine is €35 million or 7% of the company's turnover, which is actually higher than GDPR's maximum of 20 million and 4%. So there is stricter rules, higher fines, which is great because as we know, AI is becoming a part of daily life, whether it's in your business or people using it even for personal use. So it does need to be governed a lot more. So I'm glad the Act is coming in. There is, just to give you an overview of some fines that were issued even before the Act, without naming provider names, because that's not what this is about, it's just an overview. One general purpose AI provider was fined €15 million in December 24, and it was the first GDPR fine issued against AI. There was no lawful basis for training on personal data, transparency failures, etc. This shows that even without the Act in place, that there is still fines that can be happening for UK companies for the most part. We had one company, a facial recognition provider, that had the biggest cluster of fines, up to €100 million, which is still largely unpaid. The issue with this, which I'm bringing this up for a reason, is this company has no EU presence. So this is a gap for EU AI firms, which I'm going to go into with processing with outside the EU. So I wanted to bring that up, why you need to be mindful of that. There's stricter regulations on that, harder to collect fines, etc., etc. So GDPR, both in the UK and EU, already regulates AI along with the other acts that you see on screen. So equality laws, sector rules, intellectual property law, and confidentiality. So the UK versus the EU divide. So unfortunately, there is no current bill underway within the UK for an AI Act. The UK and Ireland, for the most part, work very closely together, which I'm sure a lot of the business on this call do as well. Codec itself is a UK Irish-wide company. So just to give you an overview of some of the differences, so the EU has a comprehensive prescriptive statute act, and it is by risk tier with hard rules and enforceable fines. Currently, the UK has no AI Act, but it does have a principles-based approach with existing sector regulations that apply, so the GDPR, the Equality Act, etc. What the EU looks like, it has risk tiers, so it has some unacceptable banned, high risk, limited and minimal, which we will go into in more detail in the next slide when we talk about the EU Act itself. There is a central architecture with the Commission's AI office and market surveillance. There is binding now fees and fines for breaches and fixed calendar deadlines within the Act. The UK, unfortunately, doesn't have a standalone Act, as I said, and as of now, there is no bill before Parliament. But like I say, that can change on a weekly basis. So we're in the UK, we're going by existing regulators, and there has been fines, like I say, under the AI with the UK under GDPR Acts. So that will still be happening. So it's not to say that it's unregulated, it still is, it just doesn't have a combined EU Act. So if you're operating across both the UK and the EU, I need you to be mindful that you can't just opt into one. The EU AI Act reaches both the UK and Irish firms. So for example, if you were a UK-based company and you deployed an AI system, but you had people working within Ireland, for example, the Act still applies to you because you deployed an agent with people working within Europe. So the EU Act would still apply to you. So that's something that you need to be mindful of if you're working across border. The EU defines risk by tier, the UK doesn't at all. So for example, the EU Act will define the CV screening tool as a high risk system, but in the UK it's governed by ICO guidance on and data protection. So the bottom line is at the moment, the EU does ask for more and the UK asks for less and does do things differently. If you're a UK firm and you're built to the EU standard, that will normally satisfy all of the UK principles as well, but not automatically. So make sure your governance team are looking into that. You're better to go with a higher based approach for the full business, and I would say look into the EU Act for everybody. So to give a short overview of the EU Act in the time that we do have, like I say, it's accurate of July, but the timelines have already changed once this year. The EU AI Act is the first comprehensive AI law, and it's been enforced since August 2024, and it continues to be applied in phases. And it has a very simple core idea, which is easy to follow, and it's regulate by the risk. So as a compliance professional, for me, that makes a lot of sense. I do find it is a very easy act to follow. So the higher the risk, the heavier the obligations and the higher the fines. As you can see from the pyramid on screen, there are 4 risk tiers: unacceptable, high, limited and minimal. So unacceptable is banned. So this is just a short list of practices the EU won't allow, such as government social scoring, manipulative techniques, exploiting vulnerable groups. This is enforceable since February 25, so it is already in force. So nobody should be using unacceptable or banned AI agents across UK or Ireland. And the top fine for that is 35 million or 7% of global turnover, which again is higher than the GDPR fines of 4%. Then you've got your high risk, which has got strict obligation, which is where most of your compliance work sits. So you could stand alone AI, which can be used in recruitment or worker management, such as CVs, applications for recruitment. Obligations for companies in high risk would include risk management systems, which I am going to go into detail and give you some practical tips and guidance on how to do that within your business. It also involves data governance, technical documentation, and record keeping. fines up to €15 million or 3% of turnover for high risk breaches. Limited risk, so that's systems that interact with people or generate content. So the rule here is basically tell people. So if you're using a chatbot, they must disclose that they're AI, and AI generated content must be labeled. Hopefully, for the most part, people are already doing that, but if not, it's time to look at what you've got embedded internally. And then you've got minimal risk, which is largely unrestricted, which is the vast majority of AI. So 3 fines, 35 million, 15 million, or there's a 7.5 million or 1% of turnover supplying incorrect or incomplete missing information to authorities. So if you aren't forthcoming with information, if you're under investigation, you're still liable for a 7.5 million or 1% turnover fine. So they're the maximum. There's weight factors like duration, gravity, repeated offences. So one of the key points for all businesses when they act is AI literacy. So under Article 4, organisations must make sure staff who work with AI actually understand it. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, I have a cough, so I'm trying not to do it too much on the call. So what this means that everybody that's using AI within an organisation must be trained appropriately and understand what they're using. So whether that's a policy, training, you could have your e-learning, but it must be proven that everyone understands it. The enforcement of the new act, so who actually enforces it? The European Commission AI Office supervises general purpose AI models directly, and national market surveillance. So there is actually certain surveillance now for the EU AI, which we didn't have previously. You'll see on the slides there is updated timelines of implementation, and although there is delays, the AI rules on outright bans are already enforceable. So make sure that if you have AIs embedded within your business, that you're checking if there's any banned AIs within that, which I'm hoping people don't at this point. So it's very important to note that the Act itself is not just for the providers and developers. So it's not just for those big companies that are making the AI solutions. It's also for the users and the deployers. So if you bought the tool rather than built it, you're a deployer. Most companies are deployers, not providers. However, a deployer can become a provider if you put your name or brand on a high-risk system and make substantial modifications. So if you buy an off-the-shelf product and you make modifications to that, and there's a way of doing so, when you brand it with your own branding, it can then become that you are the provider, developer of that tool. So you will then have higher risks. So what all companies must be doing at the moment since February 25 is don't be using banned AI. AI literacy, train your people, have policies, and transparency to people. So whether that's updating your privacy statements, noting on chatbots you may have on your websites that you're using a chatbot, or if people are using facial recognition tools for example, right to work documentations for recruitment, that must be explicitly highlighted. So as a company that uses AI, you are on the same fine scale, not a discounted one as the developers. So be mindful of that. So where does your data actually go? So this is where we start to get into the risk assessments that you need to take in place internally. So if you think of it simply as every prompt that you put into an AI is a data transfer. The moment someone within your business either pastes text, a document, customer details into a tool, that personal data can leave your control. Often that means that it's crossing a border as well. So treat each AI tool like a data processor and prompt like a transfer, because this is the most highest way you can look at the risk and make sure you're taking the appropriate steps. So from the data that you see on the slides, from the 3 boxes, follow the data. So you get your people. So staff would often paste prompts, documents, upload documents, Excel sheets, often personal information into tools. And then you need to look at the provider. So they may process that input and they may log it and process it, but also retain the data. So it's very important that you look at the settings that you have with providers and get some training with that. We'll go into the risks on that shortly. And then each provider can also have a sub-processor. So you're just giving it to one provider. It doesn't mean it stays within that one provider. So it usually can sit with a cloud provider and then there's sub-processors. Frequently, it's within the US or third countries. And some consumer tiers use your input to train their models, which is a high risk. So why does this matter legally? So for myself, I'm very much on compliance, data protection. So with both UK and EU GDPR, sending personal data outside the UK or the EU is a restricted transfer. So it needs a lawful route, such as an adequacy decision. So there are countries that you can send data to, which are all listed within the UK website and the EU, or you either need standard contractual clauses, binding corporate rules, or similar. So if you need to have a review of your processors and your sub-processors to see where the data is going, and with that, you may have to have certain documents on top of that and transfer mechanisms. So it's very important that you do a full risk assessment. EU to US, which unfortunately does happen quite often. A lot of the providers that people are using outside of Microsoft Copilot, which for the most part is based within the EU. A lot of the other providers that you see for AI, which I won't name any names, it's not what this is about, it's about the risk, does go via the US, which means that you need to have certain frameworks such as the data privacy framework, which is upheld at the moment, but that can change. Retention and training, these are things you need to consider. Is your input kept? Is it used to train the vendor models? Can you opt out of that? One thing this is important to note at this point is a lot of the free and consumer tiers within the AIs that you're using do often train your inputs and hold your data by default. The enterprise tiers within a lot of the solutions usually don't. And they offer that you're no training and no defined retention, sometimes zero retention. Check your settings and switch tiers where needed. I will note there is often usually a higher cost to this, but it is more secure. So the records, does your paperwork match your reality? You must have records of your process and your impact assessments and your vendor contracts. So you may need to have data processing agreements that list your sub-processors and your transfer mechanism if it is outside the EU. So residency and tier, does a sensitive data need extra protection? You may need to do transfer impact assessments as well. So practical guardrails for anyone on the call is you should have an acceptable use policies that says what you can and can't go into with each tool. Implement enterprise tiers where you can that doesn't have training or data residency outside the EU. Strict controls on your vendors. So do due diligence before you implement anything. So check where it's hosted, who the sub-processes are, and what training and retention periods there are. Keep all your records and your impact assessments as well. The unfortunate reality is a lot of the companies can't answer where does your data actually go to because there is so many sub-processing tiers. It is a huge gap, and that's not me trying to say people should ban the use of AI because it is a fantastic tool that's used on a daily basis now, but you just need to know the route that your data takes. So the real world risk register. So these are the failure modes that would show up once you start using AI. 6 to realistically watch out for within your organization. So you've got your data leakage. Your staff aren't aware of things that they should or should not be putting into AIs. They're pasting confidential data into public tools. They don't have enterprise editions. This is your everyday biggest risk. The best thing that you can do in this case is implement registers of approved tools and what can be used within each tool. That's something we've implemented within Codec. We have a register of what tools can be used where and what can be input into each with full risk assessments behind it. Now I will say that It is changing on a daily basis. We are learning as we go as well, but we're trying to get things right from the start. We want to pass that on to everyone else as well. So inaccuracy is a huge one. So output that's incorrect. So often you'll put in a question to AI, they'll come out with a very confident output, but you know that it's not right, and you prompt it again till they come back to say that it is actually a wrong response. So there should always be a human check-in element to that. There's bias and discrimination, which is an equality law problem, not just a technical one. Copyright, automated decisions with no meaningful human oversight, and security access as well, where vendors are given more access than they need. So although I'm not technical, so to speak, you shouldn't have AIs linked to your environment if you haven't done any risk assessments based on that, because they can link to certain data that you have within your SharePoint, your calendars, your emails. It's very, very important that every AI solution that you are looking at implement within your business is risk assessed from start to finish. So as a sample risk assessment, again, this is just an idea to take away with you when trying to embed AI. This is just a sample I've done based on an AI-assisted CV screening, only for the mere fact that under the EU Act that would be classified as high risk. On the left side, you will see you've got an assessment score control describing the risk. So you're categorizing it. So the likelihood by the impact for your risk score, so your inherent rating. And then the left is after controls, the residual rating. So on the right-hand side where the data goes, which is highlighted for a reason, processing locations, storage, whether it's used for training or retention. These are the fields that people often forget, and that's exactly what the where does your data slide talk about. As hard as this may sound, if you can't fill in the right-hand side panel for a tool, the business doesn't understand it well enough to use it for personal data. So I would make sure that if you're implementing anything, you have the right-hand side of that sample AI risk assessment and the details before you implement it within your business. The register that I'm going to talk about on the next slide, hopefully you can see that okay, is a risk register and a tracking sheet. So this would be a basic suggestion of all your combined risk assessments put into one sheet so it can be easily monitored. This would be also good if you were thinking about going for the ISO 42001 for the AI, something Codec is working towards as well. So this is for illustration only and not Codec's internal risk assessment, because it wouldn't be appropriate to show that. Just to note, I would also have a central log of AI approved tools that you can use in the business, which is publicly, well, for your internal, accessible to everyone within your business, so they can see exactly what they can use and cannot use and what data can be input into each. So you may have some tools that you can input some kinds of personal data, for example, Copilot, because it's based within the EU and linked to your environment. It's a lower risk tool for the most part. And then you may have other tools which you can use for code, but you should not use for personal data because it goes to the US, for example. So within your risk assessments, these are the kind of details that you should be looking out for and recording. So you've got your own internal unique IDs, the specific tool and the job it does. You should have one rule per use case, not per tool. So you may have a few risks per tool, but it means that you are tracking them as you go along with certain review periods. The risk description, so what could go wrong in plain terms. The category, so whether it's quality, intellectual property, data protection, etc. What kind of personal data is used, so whether it's special category, children, criminal, etc. And then the data location and your storage. So what country is it processed in and stored in? This can differ, which is a trigger for the transfer question. The lawful route then for your transfer for any cross-border activities. As you can see there, I have put in a couple of examples. You've got EU-based, and then you've got one within the US, which does have, for the transfer mechanism for this scenario, the EU to ES data privacy framework. Retention periods, how long are they kept for? Like I say, under a lot of settings, you can change this per solution. The owner, it's always good to have an accountable owner within the business that manages the risk. So whether that's your HR director, your solution architect, your data protection officer, and then your risk score, which for the basis that I would work out would be likelihood or impact, scored with a 1 to 5. And this is your control before, this is your risk before your controls. Then the mitigation, so the controls that you have to mitigate the risk. So you've got encryption, data minimization, no input of personal data, acceptable use policies, or you've upgraded to the enterprise edition where the no data is retained or used for training. And a lot of these enterprise editions, you also get data protection agreements, which are available as well. And then you put in your mitigating risk, your residual risk score then after you have put in your mitigations and your review dates. So this is a very useful tool to have within the business. For anyone that's on the call, this again is only an example. That's up to you, but there's some suggestions of things that you should look at to have safe transfers. So a practical governance checklist. Build your AI register, which is your foundation. Have an inventory for each AI tool, which is more than what people would expect. Classify risk, assign ownership, run impact assessments, so transfer impact assessments, do data mapping for all the transfers that you use for any AI tools or those that have transfers, vet your vendors and your contracts and do your due diligence before adoption. So within businesses, make sure you have no one internally that adopts an AI and is using that for your business work, but hasn't run it through a risk assessment or a central register. There should be someone responsible for setup of those things within your business. Keep humans in the loop. So for any decisions, make sure that there's always human oversight of everything that goes through your AI. Be transparent. So tell people they're dealing with AI. That's very simple. If you currently have AI within any of your websites or anything that you use for whether recruitment, make sure that the users are aware of this and train your people. AI literacy is a legal duty under the Act since February 2025, and it's not a nice to have, it's explicit that you must have it. So staff that use it or are affected by AI need enough understanding to use it safely. And one that isn't, implement policies and procedures. This isn't a one-off project, it is a cycle, it's ongoing. We are noticing that AI is updated daily. We're trying to stay on top of it with the business. So we have a lot to do, as does everyone, but at least the new acts are coming into play, which is a great relief for a lot of people that work in compliance, thankfully. So your key takeaways is there's 3 regimes to rely on. So you get data protection, your EU Act, and most sector rules. No free pass, it's enforced, thankfully now, and you mind the UK-EU divide. There is some changes, but like I say, if you are a UK-based company and you have deployed an AI solution and you have people that work within the EU Act also applies to you. It does not matter where your servers are based, whether they're in the UK, the EU AI Act will still apply to you. And the government beats guesswork. Do your risk assessments, register, classify and assign ownership, and keep it on top of it on an ongoing basis with regular review periods. Okay, so that's an overview as quickly as I possibly can. I probably ran over a little bit still on why we do what we do and how you can be compliant internally. And then the technical piece, some useful information now from Tushar. Tushar, if you want to take over on your end.
Thanks, Kerry. I will share my screen here. Before I start, definitely thank you so much everyone for joining today. It's really good to see so many familiar names in the attendees list. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Lovely. So without further ado, yeah, we'll start with Kerry has shown all the scary bits and also a lot of useful tips and tricks around how you can manage your compliance around specific AI areas, right? I will be looking at a couple of areas with using Microsoft tooling and what is available for you to basically make sure your consumer AIs, your custom AIs, and all of the different worlds of AIs, right, is being secure and also considering all the compliance guardrails as well. So before we get started, right, within your tenant, basically, you need to take a look at what all are the AI actors at the moment. So one thing we talked a lot about is consumer AI, the likes of ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, all those being consumer AIs and the free version of AIs, which everyone loves using. Second one up, which we got a little bit of resistance because it is expensive, the Microsoft 365 Copilot, which stays within your tenant. It is basically following all the guardrails of your tenant. So the issues that Kerry raised, okay, where your data is going, is it being used for training? We solved all that. But still, there was a lot of things along with that came in as well. So it is basically going into your all the productivity files, your confidential files, your non-confidential files, your HR data, and everything. That's basically Copilot is being grounded on all of those. Then comes your custom AI apps. And a lot of people at the moment is experimenting with this or going into production with this as well, whoever has started early in the journey, where you are building chatbots answering you about the organization. You're building different tools, which is taking X from one system and giving you insightful results from that system. And the last one up is the autonomous agents, and which is I'm a big fan of, but it is a bit scary as well when you leave your laptop and there's something happening on your laptop and it is basically non-human taking a call on your behalf or either on its own and doing some sort of stuff, sending emails, sending reminders, and we don't want it to go rogue and probably send your CEO an hate mail, right? So everyone is scared of that. So we need to make sure there is an accountability, there is proper access control to put in place as well on all of those. So does one size fit all? The answer is no, basically, because you have each of those apps have a different risk factor. Probably there is going to be an overlap, but every one of these comes with their own specific risk factors. So the consumer AIs, if you look at them specifically, they are basically the reason of data leakage. They are reason of IP loss, and there are stories around the trade secrets being fed into the consumer version of ChatGPT in the very early days, and it surfaced for a really large organization that I won't be taking names. Then comes M365 Copilot. That's where you have the oversharing, and basically you have prompt-based basically kind of a prompt injection, you can say, where users are trying to get some details out of it, which they already have access, and basically Copilot surfacing all those details on the prompts without having any restrictions around those. The next one up is the custom AIs that comes in with your prompt injection, which is the most risk that you are facing when you're publishing basically custom AI apps to people. And if you remember the example of it was floating all around for McDonald's a couple of weeks back, that the AI bot that they had deployed, it started giving people a lot of details about how they can solve a linked list in Python and along with their Big Mac order as well. So prompt injection can be another one where people are giving it a malicious prompt in order to either break the AI apps or get some data out of it. And we all know, we all have seen all those movies about the agents going rogue and taking over and doing everything, running wild in your overall environment. So the rogue actions and the permissions with the autonomous agent is another one of the risk that basically gets float. Okay, so governing the consumer AIs, and just giving you a 5 minutes quick view on each one of these is basically, first of all, you need to know what shadow AIs are being used within your organization, and that's where the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps comes into play, where you will be seeing, okay, X, Y, and Z AI apps are being used within the organization, and basically I don't want X app to be accessed. So let's say DeepSeek being a low risk, DeepSeek being a high risk app, we will just block it. We will not let people use that, but we'll let people use the other, like enterprise grade apps and things like that. Microsoft Edge for Business has came with basically, even if you are not on a managed device space of scenarios, you can use Microsoft Edge for Business, which will basically give you a prompt level DLP inspections for all the consumer AIs. So in the case of when you decide, okay, I will let my users use ChatGPT or any consumer AI within the organization, but I don't want them to putting any sort of confidential data or confidential prompt. So it is not only about your documents being tagged with confidential or certain things, but even if someone is typing in, okay, I have a project name X, Y, and Z, which project is confidential or not confidential, and based on that, give me this. So going on more of a network level, going off more of a prompt level, what people are typing within all those AIs, getting that data out of as well. Oh, sorry. Our good old conditional access is again coming into play now with all these AIs coming in, and we have ways of going off and giving based on the risk profile of the users and how they are prompting. Basically, in conjunction with insider risk management, you can put in step up MFAs or put in a block on certain things by using conditional access in there. And one of the new things that just popped in here is around the Teams AI app blocking. And I have been personally really annoyed when someone joins in and there is like a guide dog coming in with them that is called some AI, and every meeting you join, there is an additional person in the meeting showing up, which is some sort of AI. And if you're talking to multiple people outside of your organization, it can be like 10 different AI apps. But now Microsoft has added a new feature. I think it launched last, came in GA 29th or 28th of June. Now you can put in your settings that you are going to allow or deny any sort of AI apps based on what you allow. So basically, they will come in as a normal user in the lobby, and also it will be profiled based on the risk profiles as well. So if it is a suspicious app or there was one of the attacks happening, that there is apps being published, which is being used for getting into the meetings and extracting data exfiltration from the meetings itself. Okay. We have been talking about this from really long time around for Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is you need to put your Purview DSPM, making sure all the policies are in place, which is going to ensure that people are not putting sensitive prompts, people are not putting hate prompts as well. So no one is asking Copilot to write a hate mail for someone else in the organization and things like that. Sensitivity labels and DLP. This is not something new, but we have been talking about this from really long time, that you should label your content if it is confidential, if it is not confidential, and apply the certain controls that your organization's data require. And the last one up here is using the existing tools like of your access, audit, and retention, e-discovery for Copilot interaction in terms of getting all the details out of the Copilot interactions as well. So if there is any sort of interactions that is happening, which should be kept for a longer time, that they use the retention on the Copilot chats, so no one can go off and remove that and delete that from the organization's tenant. Okay. On the custom AI apps, if your app is basically Foundry based, you have the Foundry control plane where basically you are looking at a centralized view, and you can configure the evaluation of content and the safety access policies for within Foundry. On top of that, what you can do is you can add the Defender for Cloud. So Defender for Cloud, which was in Azure for a really, really long time, now it is capable of doing a lot of AI stuff as well. So this will basically give you protection on AI workloads. So things like jailbreak attempts. So if someone says ignore all the previous instructions and just do X, Y, and Z, that will be basically helping you. If you're connecting your AI apps with the data sources and you have DLP, and you have you can basically use Purview SDK, which is nothing but a software development kit that we can use within your custom AI apps, and use those in order to make sure whatever data that surfaces on those AI apps responses, it's basically being governed by Purview. And if there is anything that comes into the response, which is like, let's say, credit card numbers, taking a simple example, it will just say, okay, yeah, no, this response doesn't seem right, and it will just block it straight away. So your app doesn't surface any sensitive data in there. The last one up around autonomous agent. So Entra came in with Entra Agent ID, which is basically a way of giving your agents a first-party citizen within your tenant. So any agent that you are getting, it's basically getting an identity as your user gets. So the joiner, mover, leaver process applies to your agents as well as your normal users. On top of that, what Microsoft has came up with is called Agent 365. It came in, it basically became GA around May 2026. The Agent 365, and we'll see it in the next slide a little bit more, which gives you a bit of more visibility and security around all those agents that are floating around within your tenant. And we do have been talking about Defender and Purview for agents for a really long time. So that's basically the concept stays the same. It's just you extend it over to the agents as well as your users. So what Agent 365 gives you, it's basically gives you one of the pillars that Kerry talked about, keeping a registry, keeping an agent's map, and whatever the analytics happening on who and what is being used. On top of that, you can see the lifecycle management of all of those. You can see the audit and logging, and you can see also if they are surfacing or touching any sensitive data. These two, basically the security elements of it, the data security and threat protection, it is not something that Agent 365 is bringing, but it is borrowing from Purview again, where Agent 365 layers up with Purview and applies the same principles over to your agents as well. So anything that you have marked in as confidential, or if you have marked as a highly confidential, and if the agent is going near that, you can basically make rules that either agent should not be going there, or if it is going there, there is an alert happening, or whatever you wish to do around those. Okay. At the very end, because we are very much focused on the compliance bit elements of it, you have Purview Compliance Manager. So for those who are having problems in navigating through all these compliance controls, right? Purview itself has a really good, I would say, tooling around it, which is going to give you a compliance management component of it. And you have all the EU AI Act, ISO 42001, and all the NIS2, DORA, and all those in there as well that you can use in terms of making sure that there is all the rules and regulation you're following that, and also what is the description and what exactly the compliance says. So I believe that was all from my side, and I'll pass it over to Nick. If you have any questions, just drop it in the Q&A.
Thanks, Tushar. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for attending today, and we really appreciate it. It's great to see so many people on the webinar and joining us this morning. If there are any questions, please do pop it into the Q&A just at the top of the screen there. I've had a quick look and just a couple of queries about sharing the deck, which we will do afterwards. We share a link out to the deck, and you can get it from there, and a link to the webinar video recording as well. So I'll just give it a few seconds here and see if anybody wants to come in on the Q&A. On screen, you'll also see a QR code that takes you through to a consultancy request form by which you can speak directly to Tushar or one of our security architects just about your environment and any queries that you may have or questions. It's a complete non-obligation call on a complete non-obligation consultant's appointment. So you're more than welcome to scan that if you wish. And that link is in the chat as well to the consultation form. Okay, folks, last few seconds.
Yeah, just for the security folks who are really scared of scanning QR codes, usually so you have the link in the chat as well, so you can just follow that.
Okay, folks. I don't see anybody else coming in down the Q&A, but feel free to reach out to us directly after this session if you need to, and we can come back to you directly and maybe have a more in-depth conversation about what your requirements are or any queries that you have. Just remains to say thank you to everybody for attending the session today. Really appreciate it. Great to see so many people on the session and join us this morning. Thanks to Tushar and thanks to Kerry for your input as well. We will close off the webinar there. Thank you to everybody for joining, and have a great day.